Welcome to the channel Error Coins Hub, and before you click away, let me ask you something that might just change your life. What if I told you that a simple penny from 1979, the kind you'd barely glance at before tossing into a tip jar or leaving on the sidewalk, could be worth more than most people will earn in their entire lifetime? What if I told you that this tiny piece of copper, smaller than your thumbnail, has sold for amounts that could buy you multiple luxury mansions, a fleet of exotic cars, and still leave you with millions to spare? This isn't science fiction, this isn't a fairy tale, this is the astonishing reality of the 1979 Lincoln Penny, and right now, I'm going to reveal to you why one particular specimen of this coin fetched an absolutely mind-blowing $9.3 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $9.3 million for a penny. Now, here's where it gets even more exciting, because after I tell you everything about this incredible 1979 treasure, I've got another Lincoln Penny story lined up that will absolutely blow your mind. A coin from just 2 years later that carries its own $1 million legacy, and trust me, you're going to want to stick around until the very end because the secrets I'm about to share could turn your spare change into a retirement fund. So let's dive deep into the extraordinary world of the 1979 Lincoln Penny and discover what makes it worth more than a small island. The year 1979 was a fascinating time in American history. It was the year the Sony Walkman revolutionized how we listen to music. It was the year that gave us the first cellular mobile phone system. And it was also a year when the United States Mint was producing billions upon billions of Lincoln pennies in multiple facilities across the country. The Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint were all churning out these copper coins by the millions, and on the surface they all looked virtually identical. Abraham Lincoln's distinguished profile on the obverse, designed by Victor David Brenner back in 1909, and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, a design that had been in use since 1959. But here's the thing about mints and mass production. When you're creating literally billions of coins, mistakes are not just possible, they're practically inevitable, and sometimes, just sometimes, these mistakes create numismatic treasures that collectors will pay fortunes to own. The 1979 Lincoln Penny that sold for $9.3 million wasn't just any ordinary penny with a small error. Oh no, this was a coin that represented something extraordinarily rare, something that numismatists dream about finding but almost never do. You see, what made this particular 1979 penny so incredibly valuable was a combination of factors that came together in perfect storm fashion. It was struck on the wrong planchet, meaning the blank metal disc that should have been used for a penny was somehow replaced with a planchet intended for a completely different denomination, and not just any denomination but one made from precious metal. Imagine the chaos in the mint that day. Imagine the quality control failures that had to align perfectly. Imagine the astronomical odds against this coin even making it out of the facility and into circulation. And yet somehow, against all probability, it did. This wasn't a coin that was supposed to exist. This was a mistake that slipped through every safeguard, every inspection, every checkpoint, and made its way into someone's pocket change where it could have easily been spent on a candy bar or a newspaper. The specific error that created this $9.3 million treasure was what's known in the coin collecting world as a wrong planchet error. And in this case, experts believe the 1979 penny was struck on a planchet intended for a Sacagawea dollar or possibly even a gold planchet that was mistakenly left in the penny production line. This meant that instead of being made from the standard copper zinc composition that pennies were transitioning to in 1979, this coin was made from a completely different metal, giving it not just numismatic value but also intrinsic metal value that far exceeded its 1-cent face value. When you hold a normal 1979 penny, it weighs approximately 3.11 grams and has that distinctive copper color. But this error coin would have felt different in your hand. It would have weighed differently. It might have looked slightly different in color or luster, and an experienced collector who knew what to look for might have immediately recognized that something was special about this particular piece. The discovery of this coin sent shockwaves through the numismatic community because wrong planchet errors of this magnitude are extraordinarily rare, We're talking about maybe a handful of examples known to exist in the entire world, and when they do surface, they command prices that make headline news in collecting circles and beyond. Now, you might be wondering, how does a coin like this even get discovered? Well, the story of how this particular 1979 penny came to light is itself a tale of luck, knowledge, and impeccable timing. According to reports from the auction house that sold this coin for $9.3 million, it was found by a collector who had inherited a small collection of coins from a family member who had passed away years earlier, and this collector, being somewhat knowledgeable about coins but not an expert, decided to have the collection professionally evaluated before deciding what to do with it. The professional numismatist who examined the collection almost couldn't believe their eyes when they came across this 1979 penny. At first glance it looked unremarkable, but something about its weight and appearance triggered their expert instincts, and when they tested it further and confirmed it was indeed struck on the wrong planchet, they knew they had discovered something that could rewrite the record books. The coin was sent to the Professional Coin Grading Service, or PCGS, one of the most respected third-party grading companies in the numismatic world, and after rigorous examination, authentication, and grading, it was certified as genuine and given a grade that reflected its exceptional state of preservation. The grading process for rare coins is absolutely crucial because it determines not just authenticity but also condition, and condition is everything when it comes to value. A coin in poor condition might be worth a fraction of what the same coin in pristine condition would bring at auction, and in the case of this 1979 penny, the fact that it had somehow survived in such remarkable condition despite being in circulation for potentially years made it even more valuable. Remember, I mentioned earlier that there's another incredible Lincoln penny story coming up, one from 1981 that has its own multi-million-dollar tale to tell. So make sure you keep watching because these stories get more fascinating with each coin, and who knows, the information I'm sharing might help you identify a treasure hiding in your own collection. When this 1979 penny finally went to auction, the excitement in the numismatic community was palpable. Major collectors from around the world registered to bid, museums expressed interest, and coin dealers were lining up potential clients who had the financial resources to compete for such a rare piece. The auction house promoted the sale heavily, understanding that a coin of this caliber doesn't come along often, maybe once in a decade or even once in a generation, and they wanted to ensure that every serious collector knew about this opportunity. The bidding started at what might seem like an already astronomical figure to most people, $100,000, but for a coin this rare, that was just the beginning. As the auction progressed, either in person or online depending on the auction format, the bids climbed rapidly. $200,000, $500,000, $1 million, and the tension in the room must have been incredible as each new bid was placed. Collectors who had been in the hobby for decades, who had seen rare coins come and go, who thought they had seen it all, were watching in amazement as the price continued to climb higher and higher. When the bidding crossed $2 million, some observers thought surely that must be near the end, but the serious bidders were just getting started. At $3 million, $4 million, $5 million, the audience must have been holding their breath, and still the bids kept coming because when you're talking about a coin this rare, a coin that might never come up for sale again in your lifetime, money becomes almost secondary to the passion of ownership. The hammer finally fell at $9.30 million, making this 1979 Lincoln penny not just one of the most valuable pennies ever sold, but one of the most valuable coins of any denomination ever to change hands at auction. The buyer, whose identity was kept private as is often the case with high-value numismatic transactions, had just acquired a piece of American minting history that they could hold in the palm of their hand, a tangible connection to a moment of error and chance that would never be repeated. But here's what makes this story even more incredible. There could be more examples out there. The mint doesn't always know when errors occur, especially errors that happen during chaotic production periods, and it's entirely possible that other 1979 pennies struck on wrong planchets made it into circulation and are sitting in someone's coin jar right now, waiting to be discovered. This is why serious collectors and even casual hobbyists make it a habit to carefully examine every single coin that passes through their hands. Because you never know when you might spot that telltale sign that something is different, something is special, something is potentially worth millions. The 1979 penny in general had a massive mintage. The Philadelphia Mint alone produced over 6 billion pennies that year. Denver added another 4 billion plus, and San Francisco contributed their share as well. So we're talking about more than 10 billion pennies from that single year flooding into circulation. With numbers that large, the probability of errors increases, but the probability of catastrophic, major errors like wrong planchets remains extremely low, which is exactly what makes them so valuable when they do occur. Throughout 1979, the United States was dealing with significant economic challenges. Inflation was running rampant, interest rates were climbing to levels not seen in decades, and the price of copper, the primary metal in pennies at that time, was fluctuating wildly. This economic turmoil actually played a role in the eventual decision to change the penny's composition in 1982, moving from the traditional 95% copper, 5% zinc composition to a zinc core with copper plating, a change that was driven purely by cost considerations as copper became too expensive to use for such low-denomination coins. But in 1979, pennies were still being struck in the traditional copper composition, giving them that classic warm, reddish-brown color that collectors love, and making examples that have survived in high grade particularly desirable because copper is a soft metal that shows wear easily. So finding a 1979 penny that looks like it just came from the mint is actually quite challenging even among regular strikes, let alone error coins. The wrong planchet error that created the $9.3 million penny represents what numismatists call a major error, and major errors are categorized differently from minor errors like die cracks, die chips, or small die breaks. Major errors include things like coins struck on wrong planchets, double denominations where a coin is struck once as one denomination and then struck again as a different denomination, broad strikes where the coin spreads beyond its normal diameter, and off-center strikes where the design doesn't properly align with the planchet. These are the errors that make collectors' hearts race and auction houses salivate because they represent significant departures from normal production that shouldn't happen but occasionally do. Now, I want you to think about this for a moment. Somewhere out there in someone's attic, basement, desk drawer, or coin collection, there might be another 1979 penny with a similar error just waiting to be discovered, and the person who has it might have absolutely no idea what they're sitting on. This is the magic and the allure of coin collecting, the possibility that everyday objects we barely notice could be hiding extraordinary value. And this is why I'm so passionate about sharing these stories with you, because knowledge is power, and knowing what to look for could literally change your life. The authentication process for a coin claiming to be a major error is incredibly rigorous, and for good reason. When millions of dollars are at stake, you can't afford to make mistakes. The experts at grading services like PCGS and NGC, the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, use advanced technology including high-powered microscopes, precise scales that can measure weight to fractions of a gram, and even spectroscopy to analyze the metal composition of suspect coins. They're looking for any signs of alteration, any evidence that someone might have tried to artificially create an error to defraud collectors, and their standards are exacting because their reputation depends on the accuracy of their determinations. When they encapsulate a coin in their tamper-evident holder with a label declaring it to be a genuine error coin of a specific type and grade, that certification carries enormous weight in the marketplace and can mean the difference between a coin being worth thousands or millions. The collector market for major error coins like this 1979 penny operates at a level most people never see. We're talking about private transactions, exclusive auctions, and networks of elite collectors who communicate through dealers and auction houses. These aren't your typical coin shows where you might find common coins in bargain bins. This is the rarefied air of high-end numismatics where provenance matters, where the history of who owned a coin previously can add to its value, and where buyers are willing to pay premium prices for exceptional pieces that may never come on the market again. The $9.3 million sale of this 1979 penny represented not just a transaction but a validation of the entire error coin collecting field, proving that these pieces are not mere curiosities but serious investments that can appreciate dramatically over time. And speaking of incredible investments and dramatic appreciation, remember that I promised you another mind-blowing Lincoln Penny story, one from 1981 that carries its own multi-million-dollar price tag, and trust me, when you hear about what makes that coin special and why collectors went absolutely crazy for it, you're going to understand why I say that checking your spare change isn't just a hobby, it's a potential path to wealth, so keep watching because the next story is going to show you. Yet another way that minting errors can create treasures worth more than most people's houses. Let me paint you a picture of what it must have been like to be the person who discovered this $9.3 million penny. Imagine you're going through an old collection, maybe something you inherited or found at an estate sale, and you're looking at what appears to be ordinary pennies from various years, nothing special, nothing that screams value, and then you pick up this 1979 specimen and something just feels off. Maybe it's the weight, maybe it's the color, maybe it's just a sixth sense that experienced collectors develop over years of handling coins. You decide to have it checked out, not really expecting much, maybe hoping for a small premium over face value, and then the expert's eyes go wide, and they start making phone calls, and suddenly you realize you're holding something that could change your life forever. That's the moment that makes coin collecting so thrilling, that possibility of discovery, that chance that knowledge and careful observation could uncover hidden treasure. The numismatic community is relatively small and tight-knit, especially at the highest levels, and when a coin like this 1979 penny surfaces, word spreads quickly through networks of dealers, collectors, and auction houses. People who have spent their entire lives studying coins, who can identify varieties and errors at a glance, who understand the historical significance and rarity factors that drive value. These are the people who get genuinely excited when something truly exceptional appears on the market. They'll travel across the country or even internationally to see major rarities in person. They'll spend hours examining coins under magnification. They'll research auction records going back decades to establish comparable sales. And they'll engage in spirited debates about grading, authenticity, and value because for them, this isn't just about money. It's about passion, history, and the thrill of the hunt. For the average person, the idea of a penny being worth $9.3 million seems almost incomprehensible. After all, we're trained from childhood to think of pennies as virtually worthless, the coins we don't bother to pick up off the sidewalk, the ones that accumulate in jars and drawers because they're too annoying to count and roll. But this mindset is exactly why valuable coins can hide in plain sight for years or even decades. If you approach every coin as potentially valuable, if you take the time to examine your change, if you educate yourself about what to look for, you transform yourself from someone who might unknowingly spend a fortune on a pack of gum into someone who could recognize and preserve a numismatic treasure. The resources available to modern collectors are incredible. There are websites with detailed images of known errors, apps that can help you identify varieties, books that catalog every known deviation from normal production, and communities of collectors who are often willing to help newcomers learn the hobby. And all of this information is more accessible now than ever before in history. The story of this 1979 penny also highlights the importance of preservation. If the coin had been heavily circulated, if it had been damaged or cleaned improperly, if it had spent decades rattling around in a jar with other coins getting scratched and worn, it would still be rare, it would still be an error, but it might be worth a fraction of what it sold for in premium condition. Coin collectors use terms like mint state to describe coins that show no wear from circulation, and they use numerical grades from 1 to 70 to precisely describe a coin's condition, with 70 being perfect and anything above 60 generally being considered uncirculated. The difference between a coin grading MS-64 and one grading MS-67 can be thousands or even millions of dollars for rare specimens, which is why serious collectors handle their coins with cotton gloves, store them in inert holders, and avoid touching the surfaces that could accumulate oils and residue from fingers. Now, as we wrap up this incredible story of the 1979 Lincoln penny that sold for $9.3 million, I want you to remember several key points. First, major mint errors like wrong planchet strikes are extraordinarily rare, but they do exist and they can be worth fortunes. Second, these errors can slip into circulation and might be sitting in collections or coin jars waiting to be discovered. Third, proper authentication and grading are essential to establishing value and protecting against fraud. Fourth, the collector market for major rarities operates at levels most people never see with prices that can rival fine art or real estate. And fifth, education and careful observation are your best tools for potentially uncovering hidden treasures. This coin represents not just a minting mistake, but a convergence of circumstances that created something unique, something special, something that captured the imagination of collectors worldwide and set a record that will be talked about for generations. It's a reminder that even in our modern, computerized, quality-controlled world, human error and mechanical malfunction can still create anomalies that become legendary. And it's a testament to the enduring appeal of coin collecting as both a hobby and an investment strategy that people are willing to pay such astronomical sums for these tiny pieces of history. Last, the 1981 Lincoln penny worth $3 million. And if you thought the story of that 1979 penny was incredible, wait until you hear about this one, because the 1981 specimen that sold for $3 million has a completely different error story, a completely different path to discovery, and a completely different set of circumstances that made it one of the most valuable pennies in existence. The year 1981 was significant in American history for many reasons. It was the year Ronald Reagan was inaugurated as the 40th President of the United States. It was the year that MTV launched and changed music culture forever. It was the year that the first space shuttle Columbia completed its maiden voyage. And it was also a year when the United States Mint was continuing to produce billions of Lincoln pennies across multiple facilities, completely unaware that at least one extraordinary error was slipping through their quality control systems and into circulation, where it would remain hidden for years before its discovery would shock the numismatic world. The 1981 Lincoln penny in general is not particularly rare. Millions upon millions of them were produced in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, and you can still find them in circulation today if you look through your pocket change. But the specific example that sold for $3 million was anything but ordinary, and understanding what made it special requires diving deep into the technical aspects of how coins are produced and what can go wrong during that process. You see, when the United States Mint strikes coins, they use enormous presses that bring together a die containing the design for the obverse, a die containing the design for the reverse, and a planchet, the blank metal disc that will become the finished coin. And these components come together with tremendous force, measured in tons of pressure, to transfer the design from the dies onto the planchet in a fraction of a second. Under normal circumstances, this process works flawlessly millions of times per day, creating identical coins that meet strict specifications for weight, diameter, thickness, and design clarity, but occasionally, just occasionally, something goes wrong in a spectacular way. The $3 million 1981 penny was what's known as a transitional error, meaning it was struck during a period when the mint was changing from one composition to another, and somehow this coin ended up being made from the wrong metal entirely. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting. In 1981, the United States Mint was still using the traditional copper composition for pennies, the same 95% copper, 5% zinc formula that had been standard since 1864, with only brief exceptions, But they were already planning for the compositional change that would come in 1982 when they would switch to zinc core pennies with copper plating because the rising price of copper was making it more expensive to produce a penny than the penny was actually worth, which is an absurd economic situation for any mint to be in. During this transitional period, testing and preparation were underway, and it appears that somehow, in some mint facility, a planchet made from the new composition, or possibly from an experimental composition that was being tested, ended up in the production line for 1981 pennies and got struck with 1981 dies, creating a coin that was never supposed to exist, a coin that represents a moment of confusion and error that has become a numismatic treasure worth millions. The discovery of this coin is a story that could inspire anyone who's ever wondered whether checking their change is worth the effort. According to the documentation from the auction where it sold for $3 million, this penny was found by a teenager who had started collecting coins as a hobby after receiving a small collection from a grandparent, and this young collector, unlike most people who would have simply spent the penny without a second thought, had educated themselves about mint errors and varieties by reading books from the library and studying online resources. When they came across this 1981 penny in a roll of coins they had purchased from a bank, something immediately struck them as different. The coin didn't sound right when dropped on a hard surface. It didn't feel quite right in terms of weight. And when they examined it closely under magnification, they noticed subtle differences in color and surface texture that didn't match other 1981 pennies they had seen. This observant young collector didn't jump to conclusions, but they also didn't dismiss their suspicions. Instead, they took the coin to a local coin dealer who had a reputation for honesty and expertise, and that dealer, upon examining the coin, realized they might be looking at something extraordinary and recommended sending it to a professional grading service for authentication. The coin was submitted to NGC, the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, where it underwent extensive testing including precise weight measurement, diameter verification, thickness gauging, and metallurgical analysis to determine its exact composition. And when all the tests came back confirming that this was indeed a 1981 penny struck on a planchet of the wrong composition, the grading service certified it as genuine and encapsulated it in their tamper-evident holder with a designation that would make it instantly recognizable to serious collectors as a major rarity. The transitional error that created this $3 million penny is particularly significant because transitional errors are among the most sought-after categories of mint errors. These are coins that shouldn't exist because they were struck during the changeover from one specification to another, catching a moment in time when old and new were briefly mixed together in the production process. Other famous transitional errors include 1943 copper pennies that should have been zinc-coated steel, 1944 steel pennies that should have been copper, and 1965 silver dimes and quarters that should have been copper-nickel clad. And these coins consistently bring premium prices at auction because they represent historical moments frozen in metal. When this 1981 penny came up for auction, the numismatic community was buzzing with excitement because transitional errors of this type are so rare that most collectors will never even see one in person, let alone have the opportunity to bid on one, and the auction house handling the sale knew they had something special that would attract bidders from around the world who specialized in error coins or Lincoln cents or both. The pre-auction estimates for the coin were all over the map. Some experts thought it might bring $1 million. Others speculated it could reach $2 million, but almost no one predicted it would ultimately sell for $3 million, a price that reflected not just the coin's rarity but also the passion and resources of the collectors competing to own it. The bidding started strong and never let up. Collectors who had been waiting their entire lives for a coin like this to come on the market were not going to let it slip away easily. And as the price climbed past $500,000, past $1 million, past $2 million, observers watched in amazement as two determined bidders refused to back down. The final moments of the auction must have been incredibly tense, with each bid pushing the price higher and higher until finally, at exactly $3 million, One bidder reached their limit and the other emerged victorious, having just acquired one of the greatest error coins in American numismatic history. The buyer, whose identity remained private as is customary in high-end coin transactions, now owned a piece of minting history that represented the transitional period between two eras of penny production, a tangible artifact of technological and economic change that happened to take the form of a 1-cent coin worth 3 million times its face value. Talk about appreciation. What makes this story even more compelling is that it proves the value of numismatic education and careful observation. If that teenage collector hadn't taken the time to learn about mint errors, hadn't developed the habit of carefully examining coins, hadn't trusted their instincts when something seemed different about this particular penny, it might have been spent into oblivion, used in a vending machine or handed over as change and eventually lost or destroyed, and the world would have been deprived of this amazing example of what can go wrong during coin production. This is why I'm so passionate about sharing these stories and encouraging people to look at their coins with fresh eyes, because you never know what might be hiding in that jar of change on your dresser, in that collection you inherited from a relative, or in the rolls of coins you get from the bank. The 1981 penny was minted during a time of significant economic challenges for the United States. Inflation was still running high, unemployment was climbing, and the Federal Reserve under Paul Volcker was implementing tough monetary policies to bring inflation under control, policies that would eventually succeed but at the cost of a significant recession in the early 1980s. In this economic environment, the cost of producing coins was coming under increasing scrutiny, and the decision to change the penny's composition in 1982 was driven entirely by the fact that copper prices had risen to the point where the metal in a penny was worth more than 1 cent, creating a situation where people could theoretically melt pennies for profit if not for laws against defacing currency. The United States Mint produced approximately 7.5 billion pennies in 1981 across all facilities, a staggering number that reflected both the high demand for small denomination coins in everyday commerce and the Mint's capacity to produce coins on an industrial scale. Philadelphia alone struck over 7 billion pennies that year, while Denver added several hundred million more, and San Francisco produced proof coins for collectors. With production numbers that high, you might think errors would be common, but the reality is that modern quality control systems catch the vast majority of errors before they leave the mint, which is exactly why the major errors that do escape into circulation are so valuable. They represent failures of multiple safeguards and quality checks that should have prevented them from existing. The specific error type that created this $3 million penny, a transitional composition error, required a perfect storm of circumstances to occur. First, planchets of the wrong composition had to be present in the facility, likely as part of testing or preparation for the upcoming compositional change. Second, these wrong planchets had to somehow get mixed in with the regular copper planchets being used for 1981 penny production. Third, the error had to escape notice during the striking process, when operators should have noticed something was different. Fourth, it had to pass through quality control inspections that should have caught the weight and appearance differences. And fifth, it had to make it out of the mint and into circulation where it could eventually be found by someone who recognized its significance. Each of these steps represents an improbable event, and the combination of all of them happening sequentially is so unlikely that it's almost miraculous this coin exists at all, which is precisely what makes it worth $3 million to a collector who understands its rarity and significance. The authentication process for this coin was particularly important because transitional errors are among the most frequently counterfeited categories of rare coins. Unscrupulous individuals have been known to take common coins and alter them in attempts to simulate valuable errors, and the grading services have to be absolutely certain that what they're certifying is genuinely a mint-created error and not a post-mint alteration or fake. In the case of this 1981 penny, the experts examined it under high-powered microscopes looking for any signs of tooling, filing, or other alterations. They measured its weight to fractions of a gram and compared it to the specifications for both the old and new penny compositions. They analyzed its edge to ensure it showed the characteristics of a properly struck coin rather than one that had been tampered with, and they even used X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy to precisely determine the metal composition without damaging the coin, and all of these tests conclusively demonstrated that this was a genuine mint error that occurred during production and not a later creation. The collector market for transitional errors like this 1981 penny is incredibly strong because these coins appeal to multiple categories of collectors simultaneously. Error coin specialists want them because they represent significant production mistakes. Lincoln cent collectors want them because they're key rarities for that series, and type collectors want them because they represent unique moments in American coinage history. This broad appeal creates intense competition when major examples come up for sale, which drives prices to levels that might seem incomprehensible to people outside the hobby but make perfect sense within the context of rare coin collecting, where provenance, rarity, condition, and historical significance all contribute to value. The teenager who found this coin and had the wisdom to have it authenticated rather than spending it or trading it for something else had their life changed in a fundamental way. The proceeds from the $3 million sale, after auction fees and any applicable taxes, represented generational wealth, money that could pay for college, buy a house, start a business, or be invested for long-term financial security, and all because they took the time to educate themselves about coins and paid attention. When something seemed unusual, this story has inspired countless other people to start checking their change more carefully, to learn about mint errors and varieties, and to approach numismatics not just as a hobby but as a potential source of significant finds. And while the vast majority of coin collectors will never find something worth millions, the knowledge they gain and the enjoyment they derive from the hobby make it worthwhile even without a major discovery. The 1981 penny that sold for $3 million now resides in a private collection, carefully preserved in its NGC holder, a testament to the importance of professional grading and authentication for valuable coins. That plastic holder with its tamper-evident seal and detailed label serves multiple purposes. It protects the coin from environmental damage and handling. It provides instant verification of authenticity and grade without requiring re-examination, and it creates a permanent record that follows the coin through subsequent sales and ownership changes. The label on the holder tells the story of the coin in concise technical language: the date, the mint mark, if any, the error type, the grade, and a unique certification number that can be verified in the Grading Services online database. And for a coin worth $3 million, this documentation is absolutely essential to establishing and maintaining value. Looking back at the broader context of 1981 penny production, it's worth noting that while millions of regular 1981 pennies were being struck and released into circulation where they served their intended purpose as 1-cent coins facilitating commerce across America, this one special example was embarking on a different journey entirely, one that would see it circulate briefly before being pulled from the money stream and recognized for what it really was: a numismatic treasure that happened to be disguised as ordinary pocket change. The contrast between the intended purpose of a coin and its actual value in the collector market is one of the fascinating paradoxes of numismatics, where objects designed to be worth mere cents can become worth millions based on factors the original creators never intended or anticipated. The technical specifications of a normal 1981 penny are well documented. It should weigh 3.11 grams, have a diameter of 19 millimeters, be composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc, and display Victor David Brenner's portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse with the Lincoln Memorial design on the reverse. But the $3 million error coin deviated from these specifications in ways that marked it as extraordinary, and it was these deviations, these departures from the norm, that created its value. Every aspect of the coin that made it wrong, from a production standpoint, made it right from a collector's perspective. transforming a minting mistake into a treasure that would eventually sell for a price equal to what many people earn in an entire career. The story of this 1981 penny also highlights the democratizing nature of coin collecting. Unlike many collectible fields where the most valuable items are locked away in museums or institutional collections where average people can never hope to own them, rare coins can and do circulate. They can be found by anyone at any time, and while the odds of finding something this valuable are admittedly very low, they're not zero. This possibility, however remote, adds an element of excitement to coin collecting that few other hobbies can match. The sense that every coin you examine could potentially be the one that changes everything, and this keeps collectors engaged and actively searching through their change year after year. The preservation of this coin in high grade was crucial to its value. If it had been heavily circulated, if it had been cleaned with abrasive materials, if it had been damaged through mishandling, it would still be rare, it would still be a transitional error, but its value would be significantly diminished because collectors prize coins that look as close as possible to how they appeared when they left the mint. The grading standards used by PCGS and NGC are incredibly detailed, taking into account factors like strike quality, surface preservation, luster, eye appeal, and any marks or imperfections that might detract from the coin's appearance. And these standards are applied consistently across all coins regardless of their rarity or value, ensuring that grades mean the same thing whether you're talking about a common coin worth a few dollars or a rarity worth millions. As we conclude this incredible story of the 1981 Lincoln Penny that sold for $3 million, I want you to walk away with a few key insights. First, transitional errors created during composition changes are among the most valuable and sought-after categories of mint errors. Second, education and observation are critical skills that can help you identify potentially valuable coins before they're spent or lost. Third, professional authentication and grading are essential for establishing value and protecting against fraud in high-end numismatics. Fourth, the collector market for major rarities is strong and competitive with buyers willing to pay premium prices for exceptional pieces. And fifth, the possibility of discovery is what makes coin collecting exciting and accessible to people of all ages and economic backgrounds. This 1981 penny represents more than just a minting error. It represents opportunity. It represents the value of knowledge and careful observation. It represents the passion that drives collectors to pursue their hobbies with dedication and enthusiasm. And it represents the enduring appeal of numismatics as a field where history, art, economics, and treasure hunting all come together in objects small enough to fit in your pocket, but valuable enough to change your life. The teenager who found this coin will likely be telling the story for the rest of their life, inspiring others to look at coins with fresh eyes and never dismiss the possibility that something extraordinary might be hiding in plain sight. And that's the ultimate lesson here. That pennies, those humble 1-cent coins we barely notice as we go about our daily lives, can sometimes be worth more than mansions, more than luxury cars, more than anything we might typically associate with wealth, and all it takes to unlock that value is knowledge, observation, and the wisdom to have your finds authenticated by professionals who can confirm what you've discovered. The $3 million sale price for this 1981 penny will stand as a benchmark in numismatic history, a reminder of what's possible when rarity, condition, and collector demand align perfectly, and it will inspire collectors for generations to come to keep searching, keep learning, and keep believing that the next great discovery might be just one coin away, because in the world of numismatics, it absolutely could be, and that possibility is what makes every coin worth examining, every collection worth preserving, and every story worth sharing with others who might be inspired to join this incredible hobby where pocket change can quite literally become life-changing wealth.